Hello and welcome back to Cult Leader. I'm your Cult Leader, Spencer Henry, and Cult Babes, today or tonight, wherever you're listening, whenever you're listening, none of my business, I'm bringing you a case that sounds like it was ripped straight out of a 90s Lifetime thriller. And that's partially because it was. Yes, you guys. I have been back on my Lifetime movie bullshit. I've been consuming, baby. And thank God, because it led me to today's case and down some very bizarre rabbit holes. I'll save the name of the movie for the end of the episode because, hello, spoiler alerts, but let me ask the audience. Cool babes, have you ever done something so wild in your sleep that when you learned about it, you were like, did I do that? Did I really do that? I have so many times. Now, something you may or may not know about me is that I am a notorious sleep eater. I will just pop up in the middle of the night, out of a dead sleep, no pun intended, and go to the pantry and just snack away. Ravenous snacking. I've talked to my doctor about it. I've talked to my therapist about it. Everyone. Nobody knows why. It's not like a diet thing either. I've always been this way. Even now that my diet is so good, so healthy, it doesn't matter. It's not a timing thing. It doesn't matter how late I eat dinner or how early. It just happens. I'm a little cookie monster. Anyway, this has led me to consuming some forbidden snacks. I must admit this now. Such as the time I woke up in the middle of the night and drank a huge glug of vegetable oil, or the time I swallowed Lalabo lotion. I don't know. What was the lotion doing on his bedside table? Who knows? A mystery for the ages. I also know when I was little, I used to sleepwalk, and I remember my mom telling me one time, like when I was really little, I got up and I walked around the house and I peed inside of a planter. I don't know. He's wild. He's crazy. He can't be contained. Well, babes, let me tell you, today's story takes that whole did I do that sleep moment and cranks it up to the unthinkable. All right, so picture it May of 1987. We're in the suburbs of Toronto, Canada, and 23-year-old Kenneth Parks is living in Pickering, Ontario, with his wife Karen and their baby daughter. On the surface, it looked like your average young family trying to figure it out, but underneath, Ken was quietly spiraling. He seemed like a strong, reliable kind of guy. He was 6'5", over 200 pounds, soft spoken, and by all accounts, a total sweetie. His in laws, Barbara and Dennis Woods, genuinely loved him, even though he started dating their daughter when she was still in high school. They felt like he was a good influence in their lives. His mother-in-law even called him the gentle giant. He was close to them, the kind of close where you spend holidays together, drop by just to say hello, eat family dinner, you know the kind. Barbara treated him like her own son. I need you to know that. This was not an I hate my in-laws type of situation. But babes, deep down, Ken was not okay. Not even a little. By 1986, Ken had developed a hardcore gambling addiction, and it started like most do, with a little beginner's luck at the racetrack. One win was all it took. Before long, he was sneaking off to Woodbine Racetrack and blowing every extra dollar the couple had. At this point, he was trying to fund his addiction and support a newborn, all while working 10-hour days as a project coordinator at the Revere Electric Company. That alone could break a person. But then, as it usually goes with unchecked addiction, things got worse. To cover his losses, Ken straight up embezzled $30,000 from his employers. And yes, of fucking course, he got caught. He was fired. He was charged with fraud, pleaded guilty, and forced to make restitution. Aside from the shame and the legal stress of the situation and the panic he and his family felt, this was full on financial ruin, okay? It was overwhelming. But his in laws didn't abandon him. They didn't cast him aside like a total fuck up. Barbara and Dennis still had his back. They invited him over for dinner on Sunday, May 24th, 1987, just to talk through everything. That's how deep the love went. But that dinner never happened because sometime the night before, just after 1:30 a.m., Ken, who had dozed off watching Saturday Night Live on his living room couch, got up, grabbed his car keys, and drove 23 kilometers, that's around 14 miles, from Pickering to Scarborough. He used a spare key his in-laws had given him, and he was carrying a tire iron he brought with him. And then, in the dead of night, he walked right on into the Woods' house. And what happened next? Well, what do you think? Straight up unspeakable. Barbara was asleep in her bed when Ken stood over her. He struck her in the head with the tire iron, hard enough to fracture her skull and cause a fatal brain hemorrhage. He then proceeded to stab her 5 times with a kitchen knife. And that's when he turned to Dennis. strangled him until he lost consciousness, stabbed him as well. But Dennis? He survived. Just barely. He was left unconscious and bleeding on the bedroom floor. And then, like something out of a horror film, Ken, barefoot and soaked in blood, got back into his car, drove himself to the nearest police station in Scarborough, and walked inside. He seemed calm. His hands were still dripping with blood, tendons severed in his hand, barely reacting to the pain. And he told the fucking flabbergasted officers, "I think I've killed some people. My hands. I stabbed and beat them to death. It's all my fault." What? Did I not tell you this was a full Lifetime original? So the Toronto police sergeant, Bob Adair, later testified that when he first encountered Ken, he looked dazed, glassy-eyed, confused, like he'd just woken up in someone else's nightmare and couldn't remember entering it. He kept repeating that he didn't know why or how he went to the house. There was no clear motive. No attempt to flee, just guilt, horror, and a total break from reality. But now here's where the case truly goes from chilling to absolutely wild. During the trial, Ken's defense attorney, Marlise Edwards, stood up in court and said, point blank, he was asleep. Not like metaphorically asleep, not like in denial or drunk and blaming it on a blackout. No, she meant he was actually asleep. Like, he didn't even know what his body was doing. Sleep. She said he was sleepwalking. She literally told the jury that this man killed his mother-in-law and tried to kill his father-in-law while deep in a John Lovitz SNL fever dream. Like, fully unconscious, dead to the world, no memory, no intent, no idea what his body was doing. And guess what? The science backed her up. Edward didn't come to play. She brought 5 expert witnesses who had evaluated Kenneth Parks from every angle. Dr. Roger Brofton, a neuropsychologist and sleep specialist. Dr. John Edmeades, a neurologist. Dr. Ronald Billings, psychiatrist. Dr. Robert Hill, forensic psychiatrist. And Dr. Frank Irvin, a neurologist and psychiatrist. And all 5 of these men told the court, yes, Kenneth Parks was likely sleepwalking during the attack. And no, that does not mean that he was mentally ill or psychotic. It meant he had a condition known as non-insane automatism, a state in which your body can act out complex behaviors, but your brain is not awake. Think moving around like you're possessed, but medically your lights are off and nobody's home. It's relatable. These experts explained that Parks had long-standing parasomnias. He didn't just sleepwalk, he came from a family that practically had a punch card for weird sleep behavior. We're talking sleepwalking, sleep talking, night terrors, bedwetting, the whole parasomnia starter pack. And more importantly, Kenneth had always been a deep sleeper. Like, you could barely wake him without a foghorn. And that night, the night of the murders, with all the financial stress, the sleep deprivation, and anxiety piling up, they argued that it was the perfect storm to trigger an extreme episode. And here's the kicker. Sleepwalking is considered a sleep disorder, not a psychiatric or neurological one, meaning it's not classified as insanity. There's no intent, there's no premeditation, there's no control. So the legal term here was automatism, aka involuntary action. And under Canadian law, involuntary equals not criminally responsible. Ken didn't deny the crime. Not once. He fully admitted he did it. What he denied from the get-go was being conscious when it happened. His next memory, according to him, was seeing his mother-in-law's bloody face and then his own chopped hands before driving himself to the police station in shock. The prosecution, of course, thought this was bananas. They thought this was bullshit. They called the defense simply ludicrous, pointing to his gambling debts, the embezzlement, and the dinner plans he had with the in-laws as proof that maybe he snapped from guilt or stress. And they wanted the jury to believe that Ken was fully awake, premeditated, and just trying to cop out by blaming a night terror. But here's the problem with their argument. Ken had no history of violence. He had an excellent relationship with both victims. There was zero evidence of any planning, no written notes, no gloves, no attempt to flee, just a man in pajamas, barefoot, covered in blood, walking into a police station saying, I think I've killed some people. Like, it's like how the champ, right, my fiance, he finds me in the pantry with a bag of chips or a carton of cookies, and, like, I think I ate too much. I'm just saying, I kind of know the feeling, okay? After a 9-hour deliberation, the jury came back with, dun dun dun, not guilty on both counts. No prison, no psychiatric hospital, just freedom. He just avoided a life sentence and walked out of that courtroom a free man. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably like, what? How is this even possible? I mean, the country lost its mind. It went global. People were shocked. Was this a scientific breakthrough, a legal loophole, or the perfect crime disguised as a medical episode? One headline even asked, could you kill someone in your sleep? Tabloids were spinning it like the next Freddy Krueger sequel. What else could people blame on sleepwalking? So while Kenneth tried to lay low as much as one can after stabbing someone during a blackout, the legal drama escalated. The Crown appealed hard. They weren't arguing that he wasn't sleepwalking. They were arguing that sleepwalking itself should be redefined as a disease of the mind. And babes, that legal distinction was everything. Because if sleepwalking was ruled a mental disorder, then Ken wouldn't walk free. Even with no memory or intent, he'd be found not guilty by reason of insanity. And that comes with a whole new bag of consequences: mandatory psychiatric detention, state supervision, and the kind of stigma that follows you around forever. But Ken's legal team wasn't having it. They cross appealed to defend the original acquittal. Their whole stance was this wasn't insanity, this was automatism. He didn't act voluntarily. He had no conscious mind, and if the act wasn't voluntary, there's no crime, plain and simple. So the big legal showdown hit the Supreme Court of Canada in 1992, and babes, this was a landmark moment. 9 justices, a nation watching, the stakes wildly high, and then on August 27th of 1992, the decision dropped, 7-2, in favor of Kenneth Parks. Acquittal upheld. The majority ruled that sleepwalking in this case did not qualify as a disease of the mind under Section 16 of the Criminal Code. They emphasized that there was absolutely no history of mental illness, no risk of recurrence, no public safety concern, and most importantly, no voluntary act. Chief Justice Lemaire, writing for the majority, said that automatism isn't really even a defense. It's about whether or not something's voluntary, which is a requirement for criminal guilt. If there's no conscious will to act, there's no crime, period. Now, 2 justices dissented, Lemaire CJ and Corey J, but not in a lock him up kind of way, more like, maybe, just maybe we should monitor him a little bit, okay? Like maybe an ankle monitor or a sleep helmet, I don't fucking know. But the rest of the court was like, nah. They shot the idea down. They ruled that courts shouldn't impose post-acquittal restrictions on someone who was legally found not guilty of a crime. There's no gray area in criminal law when it comes to whether or not something's voluntary. You either chose the act or you didn't. And if you didn't, you walk free. So you can see why this became groundbreaking in lawmaking, right? The Supreme Court of Canada literally set a precedent that sleepwalking can be classified as non-insane automatism, meaning full unqualified acquittal, not psychiatric detention, and it became one of the most important rulings on criminal automatism in Canadian legal history. So after the Supreme Court's ruling in 1992, Kenneth Parks quietly faded from headlines. He went back to his private life and, according to medical reports, never had another sleepwalking episode, violent or otherwise, again. I believe he was put on a medication. But there was no recurring parasomnias, no relapses, nothing, which is interesting, right? He claimed it was all because he took steps to stabilize his life. He improved his sleep hygiene, he reduced stress in his life, and worked with several different sleep specialists, and I guess it worked. There were 0 reports of further violent or unusual behavior, and over time, he built a new life. As for his previous wife, Karen, well, she was still by his side. The same Karen who had just lost her mother and the woman Kenneth, her husband, killed and almost lost her father too. But the thing is, she believed him. She testified for him. She defended him publicly and privately. She really believed the man that she loved had done the unthinkable while unconscious. That's not just stand by your man energy. That's like complicated. But of course, it couldn't last forever. They tried. They really did. They stayed married for a few years after the acquittal, trying to rebuild. But the trauma, the grief, the psychological weight of everything that happened, that doesn't just get boxed up and put away. Kenneth was dealing with guilt, Karen was grieving the loss of her mother and this attack on her father, and I forgot to mention, her teenage sister was home at the time of the attack. So let's talk about that for a second, because this is what really had me kind of spiraling about this case. So I did watch the Lifetime movie about this, so you kind of see it unfold. and it's called like The Sleepwalker Killer, and it stars Hilary Swank and I forget his name. I think Charles Eston, I want to say is his name. Here's the thing. So Karen had two siblings. She had a brother and a sister, and the sister was, like I said, living at home during the attack. So she woke up to this gruesome scene and everything that had unfolded. And I think that's what makes it really hard to imagine when you think of like, would I be able to stay by my husband's side if he did something like this? Like, you would really have to believe them. And I think at first she was dealing with a lot of feelings of confusion mixed with grief and everything else that comes with that. But like, how could the person I love, how could the person that I trust and that I have this newborn child with do something like this? Especially when everyone's saying that he had such a great relationship with his in laws. It truly felt so random. I saw the Lifetime movie, of course, but then when I started reading about the case itself, I was kind of going back and forth a little bit because obviously sleepwalking sounds like a very strange defense, right? It seems 99% unbelievable. Like, that's just the craziest excuse someone can come up with. So crazy that you might think, hey, if not found guilty of murder, maybe they'd be found not guilty by reason of insanity. But you try and put yourself in that position. It's like, what do you do? I think once she heard these reports from all the doctors and sleep specialists that, yeah, he was likely sleepwalking during the attack, it made it easier, but still, how would you go to sleep next to him after that? How would you be certain that he's not going to get up in the middle of the night and kill your child or kill you? I mean, how do you know this won't be a repeat event? And so when I think about the trial, imagine being the dad, right? Your wife was just murdered. That same person attempted to take your life. And then your daughter is standing behind the killer, backing him up, defending him. It's just such a tricky, fucked up situation. Needless to say, eventually Karen and Kenneth divorced sometime around the mid-90s, just a few years after his Supreme Court win. The exact year wasn't splashed across headlines, but Ken eventually remarried and had more children. 5 more, in fact, bringing his total to 6. Whether or not he stayed involved in his first daughter's life after the divorce, well, the details have been mostly kept out of the spotlight, and honestly, that's fair. That child grew up with one of the most infamous legal cases in Canadian history tied to her family. By the mid 2000s, 5 of those children were attending school in the Durham District School Board. It seemed like the worst chapter of Kenneth's life was behind him, but then came 2006. Nearly 2 decades after the trial, Kenneth Parks decided to run for school trustee. Yes, trustee of a public school board. Cue the outrage, right? The moment his name appeared on the ballot, the community collectively gasped and said, wait, is that the sleepwalking guy? This is the part of the story where true crime meets PTA meeting and the ghost of the past show up in the school ballot box. I mean, imagine being a parent reading about your kid's school trustee and realizing he once stabbed somebody while asleep. Because let's be real, you can forgive, you can forget, but people do not forget the time someone bludgeoned their mother-in-law to death and got away with it because they were asleep at the time. And while Ken had been legally acquitted of murder, people couldn't ignore the embezzlement, a crime he did plead guilty to beforehand. A lot of critics didn't care about the sleepwalking anymore. They were asking, why should someone who stole $30,000 and who was once charged with murder be representing our schools? Professor Anne Lesage, a local university educator, said, my first concern would be a lack of ethics and professionalism. Sleepwalking may be a medical thing, but not the embezzlement. Another resident bluntly told reporters, you can't run for a position of trust with a past like that. It's just not right. Even though Kenneth had tried to keep the focus on education and his children's future, the public couldn't separate legal innocence from moral discomfort. The whispers turned to full-on gossipy backlash, and ultimately the pressure was too much, and Kenneth dropped out of the race. But the conversation never stopped. People kept on talking. In fact, it became a great Lifetime movie. To this day, R.V. Parks is still one of the most famous cases in Canadian law. It set a huge precedent. Before this case, sleepwalking as a legal defense sounded like a joke, far-fetched. After it, Courts had to take it seriously as a possibility. People were worried this would cause an influx of weird, I was asleep defenses, but it didn't open the floodgates because they set the rules just in case. From then on, if someone claimed they weren't conscious during a crime, they needed hard proof. Legit medical history, no motive and behavior that actually looked like parasomnia, not some half baked excuse. And Kenneth became the case everyone quotes, not because he was the first, but because he made the courts ask the wildest question: can someone commit murder and not wake up while doing it? Okay, quick sidebar, babes. Let's talk about the big question everyone was whispering and screaming after hearing about this case. Can you really murder someone in your sleep and get away with it? The legal term, non-insane automatism, aka my brain clocked out, my body went rogue. If somebody does something while completely unconscious, but not because of mental illness, could they be held criminally responsible? It's tricky, right? Because here's the part that freaks people out. How do you prove somebody was asleep? And more importantly, how do you disprove it? I think that's why a lot of people had strange feelings about this case. Even though Kenneth had zero motive, a strong medical history, and expert sleep docs backing him up, some will still go, okay, but did he just get away with it? There are tons of comments like this on articles and YouTube videos about the case, and to be fair, sleepwalking murders are super rare. Like, rare, but Kenneth Parks was not the only one to drop that sleepy little bombshell in court. I want to shift our focus onto another wild case that turned into nightmares. It's 1997. Scott Falater was a 43-year-old dad. He was a Mormon engineer, a suburban dad, golden retriever owner, just giving pure 90s Phoenix suburbia vibes. Until one night, he stabbed his wife, Yarmila, 44 times. Then, as if that wasn't enough, he dragged her into their backyard and held her head underwater in the pool until she drowned. His defense? Sleepwalking. He said he was in the middle of a parasomnia episode and had no memory of any of it. He too had a family history of sleep disorders and even claimed that he had been sleep deprived and stressed with work. But here's the twist. A neighbor testified that he saw Scott directing his dog, telling it to lie down during the murder. And babes, you don't give commands to your dog if your brain's turned off. I mean, I don't think. I can't speak from experience with that one. That one little heel girl lay down moment unraveled the whole defense. The jury was like, no, if you can whisper sweet nothings to your dog, you're not sleep homiciding, okay? There's no sleep moida happening. He was given a verdict of guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. And this case raised a big question. How complex is too complex for a sleepwalker? Like walking and stabbing, maybe, but dragging, hiding evidence, shushing the dog. Too much, too conscious, in their opinion. And then there was another case involving this man named Brian Thomas in Wales in 2008. Brian and his wife Christine were on holiday in their camper van, just enjoying retirement. And he had a long documented history of night terrors and parasomnias, like decades long with receipts. And one night he had a terrifying dream that somebody had broken in. In his sleep, he tried to protect Christine, only to wake up and realize he had strangled her to death. He was devastated, and I mean full-on sobbing in court, no memory of the act and no reason to harm her. Expert testimony confirmed a REM sleep behavior disorder, and the jury believed it. They returned a verdict of not guilty due to non-insane automatism. The public actually had sympathy here. There was no motive, no cover-up, and he was visibly destroyed by what happened. Sometimes a genuine grief makes a better witness than any expert. But let's stay across the pond for a minute and jump back a few years and talk about Jules Lowe from Manchester, circa 2003. Now, this one gets murky. Jules had beat his 83-year-old father to death with over 80 blows. And then he said, I must have been sleepwalking. I blacked out. Psychiatric experts supported the idea that he had dissociative or parasomniac behavior, but the violence was extreme. 80 blows, babe. That's not, oops, I had a parasomnia episode and grabbed my gun. That's insane rage level. That shows intent, and people were uneasy to say the least. Was it mental illness? Was it a cover? The line got blurry real fast with that one. This wasn't Kenneth Parks with a single violent outburst and no history. This was prolonged, repeated violence, and that mattered. The jury just couldn't ignore the brutality of it all. Instead of a straight guilty verdict, they came back with a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity, and Jules was committed to a secure psychiatric facility. And just to sum up this little series of sleepwalking nightmares, let's throw it way back to a Victorian scandal with Albert Terrell, Boston. The year's 1846. This man was accused of slashing the throat of his sex worker lover, Maria Bickford, and then setting the brothel on fire to cover it up. His defense attorney was the legendary orator Rufus Cody, the Mark Garagos of 1800s courtroom drama. He pulled the sleepwalking card before it was even a thing. This was the first time anyone used it in US legal history. And guess what? He was acquitted. But let's be real, people weren't sold. Many believed it was his attorney's charisma, not the facts, that swayed the jury. Because, babes, no one believed you could murder your mistress and light the building on fire while unconscious. But hey, maybe. So where's the line, babes? That's the thing, right? Sleepwalking defenses test the foundations of criminal law, and law is all about two things. Actus reus, you did it, and mens rea. You meant to. And if you're unconscious, there's no intent. You're not legally you at that moment, but the courts still have to ask, okay, but are you going to do it again? Even then, the law might let you go, but the public? Oh, babes. They'll never forget. So, yeah, I bet you're gonna fall asleep a little differently next to your partner tonight, huh? Like, do you even know if they've got a history of parasomnias? Did their great aunt sleepwalk into traffic once? Do they twitch in REM sleep? Ever whisper in their sleep? Babe, keep your fucking eyes out, because sure, maybe they're snuggled up all sweet right now, but just know, Kenneth Parks looked like a literal teddy bear before things went sideways. The gentle giant, remember? He went from Saturday Night Live to a sleepwalking murder trial, and as for me, I'm gonna lock up the pantry and then the knives, because apparently I'm one stress dream away from reenacting a Dateline special. That's it for this week. I will see you next time, and until next time, sweet dreams.